when the dream becomes visible. Saturn conjunct Neptune through 3 centuries, and what happens when they return to Aries. This destruction of the T is so bold, so daring, so firm, intrepid, and inflexible, and it must have so important consequences and so lasting that I can't but consider it as an epocha in history. John Adams, December 17th, 1773, Saturn at 25 degrees Virgo, Neptune at 20 degrees Virgo, 2 months after their exact conjunction at 18 degrees. Every 36 years, Saturn and Neptune meet at the same degree in the same sign. Saturn, the god of wealth and time, the planet of structure, responsibility, and the cold architecture of reality. Neptune, the god of fresh water and the sea, planet of dreams, illusions, and the invisible currents that move beneath the surface of what we call civilization. When these two converge, the dream a society has been living inside becomes visible as a dream. What was mistaken for permanent reality is revealed as construction. And the only question that remains is whether you rebuild consciously or cling to the rubble. Their conjunction is never quiet. It collapses institutions that have outlived their truth. It dissolves boundaries between what is real and what was only believed. And it asks of individuals and empires alike whether the structures you have built serve the life within them or merely imprison it. Since 1703, Saturn and Neptune have met 10 times. Each conjunction carried a different sign, a different degree, and a different chapter in the human story of what happens when reality and illusion can no longer be told apart. On February 20th, 2026, they meet again at 0 degrees Aries, the first degree of the first sign. For the first time in 323 years, this conjunction returns to the sign where the self is forged through action. And at 0 degrees, there is no secondary coloring. The degree doubles the energy of the sign it occupies. This is Aries squared, pure, undiluted initiation. To understand what that means, we have to trace the rhythm. 1703, the window forced open. Aries, 11 degrees. On March 27th, 1703, Saturn and Neptune met at 11 degrees Aries, the Aquarius degree. And in that single degree, the entire era reveals itself. This was not Aries' raw confrontation. This was Aries filtered through Aquarius, the reformer, the modernizer, the one who fights not for personal glory, but to drag an entire civilization into its future. 2 months before the exact conjunction, Peter the Great laid the foundation stone for St. Petersburg on the marshy banks of the Neva River. He was building a city from nothing, a window to the west, to wrench Russia out of centuries of isolation and remake it as a European power. He redesigned the army, built a navy from scratch, opened Russia's first newspaper, secularized the church, and replaced the old feudal hierarchy with a merit-based bureaucracy. Aries initiates, Aquarius reforms. Peter did both with the force of a man who understood that the old dream of Holy Russia, insular, theocratic, frozen in tradition, had become a cage. But the same transit energy moved through his opponents. The Streltsy rebels and old believers, the boyar aristocracy, they felt the same Aries fire as a call to defend what they knew. Peter crushed them with brutality that matched his vision and scale. The Streltsy were executed by the hundreds, their bodies displayed as warnings. 30,000 serfs died building St. Petersburg, conscripted from across the empire to raise a city on a swamp because one man's dream demanded it. This is what Saturn, Neptune, and Aries looks like when the initiator refuses to negotiate with the past. Revolutionary clarity purchased at devastating human cost. Peter loved his vision more than he feared the resistance, and the resistance feared the future more than they loved the structures they were defending. The same fire, different relationships to it. 1773. The inventory of grievances. Virgo, 18 degrees. 70 years later, Saturn and Neptune met at 18 degrees Virgo. A Virgo degree in Virgo, double Virgo. And the revolution it seeded was not born in rage, but in meticulous accounting. On December 16th, 1773, colonialists dumped 342 chests of British tea into Boston Harbor, not as a spontaneous eruption, but as the culmination of years of itemized objections to taxation without representation. John Adams recognized it immediately for what it was, an epocha. The colonies were not simply angry, they were organized. They had cataloged every offense, weighed every injustice, and determined with Virgoan precision that the existing structure no longer served. Within 3 years, the Declaration of Independence would present the case for revolution as a detailed inventory of violations, grievance by grievance, line by line. On the other side, King George and Parliament responded with their own Virgoan instinct. The coercive acts, an attempt to systematize and tighten control over the colonies. Both sides were doing Virgo's work. One was cataloging freedom, the other was cataloging order. The same energy, two irreconcilable purposes. 1846. The dream discovers itself. Aquarius, 27 degrees. On April 3rd, 1846, Saturn and Neptune met at 27 degrees Aquarius. 5 months later, on September 23rd, astronomers identified Neptune for the first time through a telescope at the Berlin Observatory. The planet of dreams discovered during its own conjunction with the planet of reality. Neptune had always been there. It took Saturn's presence to make it visible. The metaphor wrote itself across the decade. In February 1848, Marx and Engels published the Communist Manifesto, an ideology born at the Gemini degree of Aquarius, where ideas reshape collective structures. The Irish famine drove millions of people to their graves and another million into immigrant ships, exposing the lethal indifference buried inside the British imperial dream. The Mexican-American War redrew the map of North America under the banner of Manifest Destiny, a national myth so powerful that it justified the seizure of half a continent. Everywhere, the invisible was becoming visible. Dreams were being named, and the naming changed everything. 1917. The king devoured by his kingdom. Leo, 4 degrees. On July 31st, 1917, Saturn and Neptune met at 4 degrees Leo, the Cancer degree. Leo is sovereignty, the divine right to rule, the throne that claims to embody the people. Cancer is the people themselves, the homeland, the family, the ones who belong to the kingdom the king claims to protect. A king destroyed by the very people he said he ruled for. That is the Russian Revolution in a single astrological sentence. Tsar Nicholas II had already abdicated by March, unable to hold the structure together as war, famine, and strikes tore the empire apart. By July, workers and soldiers filled the streets of Petrograd in the uprising known as the July Days. The same month, Saturn and Neptune made their exact conjunction. By November, the Bolsheviks had seized power entirely. The Romanov dynasty, which had ruled for 300 years, was gone. Within a year, the Tsar and his entire family would be executed in a basement in Yekaterinburg. But the Cancer degree carried a warning the revolutionaries could not hear. Cancer protects, and Cancer devours. The Bolsheviks, who claimed to fight for the motherland, became the new sovereigns, and the regime they built would prove as ruthless as the one they destroyed. The same transit energy that toppled the throne built a new one in its place. The dream changed costumes. The structure of power did not. 1989. The wall that was never permanent. Capricorn at 10 degrees. On November 9th, 1989, the Berlin Wall fell. 4 days later, on November 13th, Saturn and Neptune met at 10 degrees Capricorn, the Capricorn degree, double Capricorn. Structure collapsing under its own structural weight. For anyone who grew up during the Cold War, the wall was not a political arrangement. It was reality itself. James Bond fought the Russians. Tom Cruise shot down Russian MiGs. Pink Floyd mythologized walls, personal, political, psychological, until the very concept seemed permanent. The Soviet Union was the immovable object against which the entire Western world defined itself. And then, in a matter of weeks, it was dust. The Capricorn degree doubled down on what Capricorn already does. It tests every structure for integrity, and what could not bear its own weight came down. The Soviet system had been hollowed out for decades, economically unstable, ideologically exhausted, held together by inertia and fear. Saturn-Neptune did not destroy it. Saturn-Neptune revealed that it was already destroyed. The conjunction made the invisible visible, and once everyone could see the emptiness behind the architecture could no longer stand. But on the other side of the world, the same transit energy met a different response. In June of that year, Chinese students filled Tiananmen Square with the same longing for freedom that was breaking walls in Berlin. The Chinese government answered with tanks. One wall fell, another was reinforced with violence. Same energy, same year, different relationships to the dream, and different consequences for those who dared to name it. The pattern. Trace the line from 1703 to 1989, and a single engine emerges. Saturn-Neptune conjunctions do not create crises. They reveal the distance between what a society believes about itself and what is actually true. Peter the Great saw Russia living inside a medieval dream and forced it into modernity. The American colonies saw an entire empire claiming justice while practicing extraction, and they documented every contradiction. Marx saw an economic system devouring its own workers and gave the critique a name. The Russian Revolution saw a throne claiming divine authority over a starving people, and the people took the throne. Ancient chronology is debated territory. Dates from this era can shift by decades depending on which scholarly framework is used, but within the most widely accepted timeline, the last time Saturn and Neptune both occupied 0 degrees Aries was approximately 1742 BC. The conjunction itself formed at 29 degrees Pisces, the anaretic degree, carrying the urgency of completion before Saturn crossed into Aries first and held 0 degrees as Neptune followed. What was happening in Mesopotamia at that threshold? Hammurabi, king of Babylon, had just completed one of the most extraordinary acts of initiation in human history, receiving what he claimed was divine law from Shamash, the god of justice, and carving 282 statues into a 7-foot basalt stele for all to see. Saturn, structure, law, stone; Neptune, divine inspiration, the god's mandate. Aries, the individual will imposing itself on reality, the oldest comprehensive legal code in recorded history, emerging at the same degree where Saturn and Neptune meet again on February 20th. We cannot hold this to the same evidentiary standard as 1773 or 1989, but the resonance is hard to ignore. The last time this degree was activated, a human being carved a dream into stone and called it law. The question is what gets carved this time. February 20th, 2026, the return to Aries, 0 degrees. Saturn and Neptune have not met in Aries since 1703, 323 years, and the last time they met here at 11 degrees, the Aquarius degree, the energy expressed as collective reform, a czar remaking civilization, the individual will harnessed to a communal vision. This time they meet at 0 degrees, and 0 degrees changes everything. At the Aquarius degree, Peter the Great's Aries was filtered through the reformer's lens. At 0 degrees, there is no filter. The degree doubles the sign. This is Aries as Aries, the pure, unmoderated assertion of the self. The first degree of the first sign in the entire zodiac. Not reform, not modernization, initiation itself. The dream that becomes visible this time is not one's empire or one's ideology. It is the dream of who you have been pretending to be. Neptune has spent its final years in Pisces dissolving the collective illusion, the commodified spirituality, the performed identities, the consensus reality that was already fractured before it shattered. Now Neptune enters Aries and the disillusion turns personal. Saturn follows, demanding that whatever self emerges from the fog be built on something real. This is not a transit that asks you to fix the system. This is a transit that asks you to stop hiding inside it. The structures that collapse now in your life, in the culture, in the institutions you assumed were permanent, are collapsing because the dream they were built on has become visible. And once you can see it, you cannot unsee it. The question is not whether the old structures will fall. The pattern across 3 centuries has already answered that. The question is, what are you willing to build in their place, and whether you love the life trying to emerge through you more than the fear of what it will cost to let it in. Every Saturn-Neptune conjunction reveals the distance between the dream and the real. This one asks you to close it, not by retreating into a new illusion, but by becoming the person who no longer needs one. What does the initiation look like in your life? What structures have you mistaken for permanent? And what is the first honest act of the self that remains when the dream burns away?